I never wanted children. I actually didn't like children. And I was terrified that if I had a child, the kid would be a troublemaker like me. I actually didn't think I'd get married either, but what's that about the best laid plans? I met Rami when I was 35. We dated for 3 weeks and then moved in together. 2 years later, we married. Now, he wanted to be a parent and he wore me down, so we tried getting pregnant, but it never worked. I gotta say, deep inside, I was relieved. Deciding kids were not our future, we went about building a fabulous life. His TV writing career took off, and my acting, especially my voiceover career, thrived. We renovated a beautiful log cabin on 20 acres in western Montana and moved in with our 2 cats, Mary Louise O'Brien and Phoebe Johnson. We adopted a huge Weimaraner named Gus, a horse named Smokey, and a goat named Shirley. I started raising primitive Shetland sheep, the kind you see in old paintings, bushy round bodies with little spindly legs, their coats in natural shades of brown, black, and gray. I registered my flock with the Shetland Society and named each sheep after a famous basketball player. Charles Barkley, Lisa Leslie, Cheryl Swoops, Dennis Rodman, well, you get the idea. I learned how to spin wool, and I joined a women's wool arts group. I had no idea life was about to change. It was such a little thing. The yearly county fair was starting, and our wool arts group had a display, and each member was assigned a time to man the booth, spin yarn, and talk to folks. On my appointed day, I loaded up my truck with my wheels, some pictures of the sheep, and some fleeces, and hit the road for the 20-mile drive to the fairgrounds. I went to our booth and set up, and for a couple of hours, people came and went. Now, one thing Montana lacks is ethnic diversity. Folks, especially in 1996, were mostly white or Native American, so I was thrilled when a small, very dark-skinned Black boy approached me. At last, a family of color. Well, I needed to entertain this kid until I could meet his parents. I asked his name. Joshua, he said. I'm 3. Well, how grown up you are. And where's your mommy? Around here, he said. He looked around. I looked around. I only saw a sea of white faces. There, he pointed. Mama, he called. A young, slender white woman in her 30s came rushing over. Joshua, we've been looking for you. I'm here, he proudly said. His mom told me that she had 2 biological children and 2 adopted Black children. And then she casually remarked, for Black children in the United States, there aren't enough adoptive parents available. And there's a prejudice against very dark-skinned boys, making them the least adoptable child in this country. It's awful. The prejudice, the bias. We'd better get going, she said. As Joshua started off with his mom, he turned and said in his little child voice, you ought to get one of me. And then he disappeared into the crowd. His words were like love arrows piercing my heart. And on the ride home, all I could think about was Joshua. I came into our cabin and I told Rami about him and what his mother said. And then out of my mouth came the words, what do you think about adopting a Black child? Rami grinned and said, great idea. And we started the process, finding a program that specialized in placing dark-skinned Black male infants. And the process was up and down, easy and difficult, but finally we were matched with Micheline, a pregnant woman in Texas whose ultrasounds indicated she was having a boy. We were a perfect fit, Micheline, Rami, and I. Now, adoptions are governed by state law, and in the end, it was easiest to bring Micheline to LA and set her up in an apartment, and Rami and I would stay with his mom. We made arrangements with a doctor and to give birth at Van Nuys Hospital. And a week before her due date, I brought Micheline back to her apartment after a barbecue dinner with friends. Rami went home to write, and Micheline and I were excited about watching an episode of Stephen King's miniseries, The Shining. And then she started not to feel well. Indigestion, she thought, maybe the barbecue sauce. We called the doctor. There was no contractions, just this indigestion. Well, you know where this is going. The doctor told us to head over to the hospital, and I called Rami, who met us in the parking lot. And then, man, it all just happened. I couldn't find a wheelchair, and then we walked into the hospital entrance as her water broke. They got us to a room. It had a bed and stirrups and a curtain that could go around for privacy. And there were 2 chairs in the corner. No nurse was on the floor. Only a student nurse who, seeing what was happening, fled. It was 11:35 p.m. Micheline was in labor. She said, I don't want to be exposed. So Rami sat down as I closed the curtains. I managed to get Micheline's pants off. I put a blanket over her and washed up in the sink, sanitizing my hands. Micheline cried out in pain, and I leaned over and I said, I know. And like something out of The Exorcist, she grabbed my shirt and pulled my face to hers and growled, you don't know. It was funny, actually, and was just enough to break the tension. I could see the top of the baby's head, and just then a nurse came flying in. I've got to wash up. Push, she yells to Micheline. She looks quickly in, says to me, the baby's shoulder is caught. Press the shoulder and help the baby come out. I didn't think. I just did it. And suddenly the baby popped out like a shot from a cannon. The nurse said, clamp and cut the cord. What? I'm a fucking actor, I yelled back. The nurse clamped the cord, motioned to this scissory-looking thing, and I cut it. The baby gasped, coughed, and then loudly wailed. We did it. Our little baby was born. Our baby girl. What? What the fuck? All indications pointed to a boy. Later, we realized that during the sonograms, the baby had one hand down between her legs right from the start. She was dictating how her life would be. We named our daughter Micheline after her birth mother. And so at the ripe old age of 47, I became a mother. My daughter Micheline is the greatest joy of my life. I don't deserve her, but I'm so very grateful for her.
Thank you, Joanna.